The US military has said that it would begin a blockade of all Iranian ports hours after collapse of talks. This comes as the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said that Tehran was just inches away from a deal with Washington in Islamabad. The US Central Command announced that the blockade will be enforced impartially against vessels of all nations entering or departing Iranian ports and coastal areas, including all Iranian ports on the Arabian Gulf and Gulf of Oman. The statement said that the restrictions will come into effect at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. The US Central Command clarified that it would not impede vessels transiting the Strait of Hormuz to and from non-Iranian ports, and that further instructions for mariners would be forthcoming. Iran's Revolutionary Guards have declared that they are in full control of traffic through Hormuz and warned that they would trap any challenger in a deadly vortex. The announcement came despite a ceasefire in place that is aimed at pausing the 6-week war until April 22, with tensions centered on whether the US can force Iran to reopen the strategic Strait of Hormuz, another of its key demands in the stalled negotiations. Washington has put the onus of failed talks on Islamic Republic's refusal to abandon its nuclear ambitions. Upon his arrival at Joint Base Andrews, Trump suggested that Iran is in very bad shape and is desperate, adding that Iran will not have a nuclear weapon. A US official said Iran had rejected Washington's call for an end to all uranium enrichment, the dismantling of all major enrichment facilities, and the transfer of highly enriched uranium.
I think Iran is in very bad shape. I think they're very desperate. We had a meeting that lasted 21 hours. We understand the situation better than anybody, and Iran's in very bad shape. Iran will not have a nuclear weapon. We'll not have. There is no way that they're going to get. They still want it, and they made that clear the other night. Iran will not have a nuclear weapon.
Well, Iran's Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, who led Tehran's delegation in Pakistan, said on returning home that the country would not bow to any threats from Washington, while Navy Chief Shahram Irani called Trump's blockade threat ridiculous. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said that Iran engaged with US in good faith to end the war, but encountered maximalism, shifting goalposts and blockade. Meanwhile, UK has announced that it will not participate to enforce a naval blockade against Iran. According to reports citing British officials, UK naval ships and soldiers will not be used to block Iranian ports. The development comes as Trump reiterated his disappointment in NATO upon falling to help with Hormuz. To discuss more on the fragile Iran-US ceasefire and latest developments on conflict, we were earlier joined by Dov Zakheim from Washington, D.C. He is former Undersecretary of Defense in George W. Bush administration and currently Senior Advisor at Center for Strategic and International Studies. Listen in to what he had to say.
Well, it just seems to me that, first of all, as I said, the foreign minister was exaggerating when he said they were inches away. I mean, clearly what Iran was offering was nothing what Mr. Trump wanted to get. Now, the question then becomes, how long did it take before the United States realized they were getting nowhere? Remember that before all of this started, when there were still talks before the American and Israeli attack, Mr. Witkoff and Jared Kushner both realized that Iran had no intention of cutting back on its nuclear program. And when they offered that Iran's uranium could be shipped elsewhere and then essentially brought back for domestic purposes, the Iranians rejected that. And Witkoff and Kushner concluded that Iran really wanted to go ahead with a nuclear program. Now, it just seems to me that after 21 hours, Mr. Vance and, of course, Witkoff and Kushner were both there as well. Mr. Vance concluded that Iran had not moved off its basic position. And in fact, as I mentioned, there was no Iranian willingness to consider uh, pulling back on its support for proxies. There was no Iranian willingness to even address the missile question, not to mention, of course, the nuclear issue. And so it just seems to me that the definition of inches varies very wildly between what the Foreign Minister of Pakistan said about inches and what the American negotiators consider to be inches. Well, two things. First, the Europeans continue to talk about how they could contribute to keeping the Strait of Hormuz open. The French and the British in particular are talking about who's going to lead the effort. I heard this only today, in fact, from Europe. Um, the United States has not said it will block every ship. What Central Command has said is they will ensure that those ships that are coming through are not coming through to Iran. And so if it's a French ship or a Chinese ship for that matter, if they're going to one of the Arab ports, they're not going to be prevented from entering. So therefore, the key question becomes, first, can the United States Navy ensure that the mines are cleared? I think the answer is yes. Can the United States Navy prevent or even destroy the IRGC's small naval boats? I think, again, the answer is yes. Can the United States Navy ensure that those ships that wish to enter the strait in order to go to the Arab side of the strait will be able to do so? Again, I think the answer is yes. I think the Iranians are really suffering from a very serious illusion that somehow they are still on an equal basis with the United States. It's just not the case.